All right, about to start recording. I don't know if you guys can hear me. Um, so last week I told you guys that for the Euro US dollar that we were gonna push up to the upside more inside of this weekly fair value gap. Hopefully, we could test this and then see a corrective move on lower time frames for the upcoming short that's seasonally almost in alignment with May. Um, so yeah, May most of the times, it'll have like say like a down month. April is seasonally, more likely to go up. Um, you could do your research and find that on your own. Like check a seasonal chart, you'll see, and then you could do some back tests on that. Now, like I said from last week, your USD had the potential or the likelihood that it would go up inside of this weekly fair value gap. Um, I said I wanted it to see it reach the top of the weekly fair value gap, probably more inside of this weekly gap here, and then you know, see if we could make a like a meaningful structure shift, and then head down lower to the downside to the 6 month fair value gap. On the weekly time frame, like I said, I'm going to show you again. This date right here is September 15, 2025. This date right here is this date right here is January 26, 2026. This, if you look at it on a weekly time frame, is a liquidity swing. Why is it wicking off of this area? Well, this is a monthly fair value gap. This was the weekly fair value gap that it was respecting, or so to say, staying under. It looks like a break of structure on the daily chart, and that's what's getting a lot of people confused right now. But really, this is just a sweep of the liquidity, testing the monthly fair value gap. And then we have this yearly fair value gap up here, very big one, in my opinion. And for it to actually get up here, we would have to find liquidity down inside the 6 month fair value gap. So it's like a longer term play. This is for like swing traders if you like swing trading. So we're gonna have to get into this 6 month fair value gap at least, make some structure, and then say head up here for this more meaningful push to the upside. Um, However, this is just my long term bias. I don't take entries off of the higher time frame unless I have to, like this particular move. If it gets up in the here, I'll have a entry say about around let me see. Yeah, short position. I'll have an entry say I wanted it to be here, but I could have it, anywhere. I'll eye it out around here, you know. This is like the first entry, right? I'll have it like around here. My first entry with a stop loss of 54 pips, aiming for the 6 month fair value. Yeah, probably to the low or the midpoint of it, you know, for a nice 1 to 10 risk to reward if given. Or I could have it up here at this particular high, which would give me a 1 to 3 risk to reward. The risk to reward at the beginning of the entry on a higher time frame doesn't really matter, because when you scale into the lower time frame and you see the structure shift and you enter on other positions, then you're um, you're just scaling and you're keeping yourself in profit so you could like risk more money. You understand? You could have it here, right, for 93.6 stop loss with a target of 1 6, or you could have it, like I said, right here, which is like more reasonable, 54 pip stop, 1 to 10, right? And then, you don't want to be risking everything on this particular, you know, entry here because it's the higher time frame. You want to scale into then start using your intraday uh, uh, skills. All right. So just quick heads up. Then when you scale down to the daily, I'm going to show you guys how if my setup shows, I'm going to show you guys how I um, enter positions on an intraday level. All right. Now, why do I think that it's going to go up here a little more into this gap? Is because one, the DXY. So if I go to the DXY, we still haven't came down inside of this weekly fair value gap. We still haven't tested this weekly fair value gap. And the euro is already inside of its weekly fair value gap. So it's showing a lot of strength for Euro USD. You know, the war still going on. I think the US had taken some level of control over the Strait of Hormuz. Um, So yeah, basically we just waiting for this weekly fair value gap to get tapped into to then scale into lower time frames. It could be the daily, to see any structural shifts so that we could head up for the upside for um the DXY. If we go to the weekly time frame once more, remember, you got this low here, and then we had the sweep of the liquidity, you had the break of structure. Now we have in the retracement. Put your fib on it. I like to put my fib to the low, to the high, right? We're down past the 50%, moving into like 62%, golden area. Now, and it aligns perfectly with the midpoint of the weekly fair value gap on the DXY. So keep an eye open for that. GBPUSD. What I have for GBPUSD is this little small weekly fair value gap right in here. If we can somehow get to that, it's a stretch, but if we can somehow get into this, the low of this fair value gap would be my entry, honestly. It's literally doing too much, This is like a 1 to 6.66. Um, you know, it topped its 3 months fair value gap in like November of last year. So we're gonna see if we can get below that. Um, and I'll check the other time frames to see when. But that is a stretch, and that's why I'm not looking at you right now. If you're trying to look at you right now and you don't know what's going on, you have to look at the weekly time frame because it's guiding price action right now. But yeah, GBP USD, just looking for it to, we finally took taking out some liquidity here. You know, we can definitely say reverse head down, lower, come back up, whatever it wants to do, the whole 9 yard. Um, but I'm interested to see, how this plays out. So yeah, that's my take. Also, I am in a trade in EURUSD right now. Um, we go to the 3 hour. So yeah, based this trade off of the 3 hour time frame. So we opened up, today is Monday, this was Friday here, and we opened up with a gap. Normally, I love seeing when we open up with gaps. It's going to create a fair value gap. The 3 hour was the cleanest fair value gap. Don't mind this, I didn't have my entry here. I entered whilst it was coming down, so I'm like somewhere up in here with my entry. So we entered. I entered this trade. I had a limit order set down here, but I entered manually up in this region. Um, and then we just waited. It has to fill the gap, and that's why I entered the trade. And then we're gonna see if we could get a break above this high and get a move into the high of the um, weekly fair value gap. If not, could always close out some positions. But, we're just taking it slow, one step at a time. But yeah, guys, that's my take. And the reason I entered on the 3 hour fair value gap, I think this should be notable to y'all. So I know that it has to go up because, you have to fill in the gap. Not all the time. And then we have a very the narrative is that we have a very high likely chance that it can get to the top of the weekly fair value gap. So if I go to the daily, because I just go from time frame to time frame, I'm looking for entry. Obviously, I'm not going to get an entry off of the daily time frame because it opened up with a gap. Go to the 4 hour. The 4 hour is quite interesting. You had this break of structure here. Um, it looks like a break of structure, but on other brokers, it would look like a liquidity sweep just because of how this candlestick closed above, you know, and then whatever, right? But to say I have a fair value gap or entry, no. This is where I find my fair value gap, you know, up on the 3 hour, come players around and then heads up. And then, you could still go and look at the 2 hour. It's a little fair value gap in there. Go to the 1 hour. That's a little fair value gap. And then notice how it breaks structure after it made this liquidity in the Asian session. Breaks the structure, close above, came down, give you an entry inside of that fair value gap. And then just proceeds to heads up higher. So yeah, guys, that's my take. Um, if you want to know anything else, just leave some comments. But we're gonna see how it goes. Peace.